are things?
Things are good.
Yeah, I've got a few things going on.
Things are going on. It's busy. Feels like we started a bunch of things, and now
you have to keep it going.
Now, I got to execute. Now
Right.
you got to do the things that you started.
Right, especially after having a video. Now the
now,
pressure's
yeah,
really
now
on
no pressure. You know, we brought Rory in to solve all the problems. Here's a video about him.
you. Right.
Oh, great. But no, it's been good. We're having fun. We're making some new connections, and just kind of, I don't know, between all of the different things going on. I mean, we recorded that video, and like I probably talked for 10 minutes about different things going on. You only included two of them.
Yeah, I know.
And there's, because you know some of the other ones haven't quite started yet or hadn't started then. But in addition to a beer church and a trail church, then you got pop culture, which we just had our second night of last night.
Okay, and how did that? You getting a decent?
Yeah, we got a nice little small group. There were eight folks there plus
start.
me, and we're we're having fun and talking about sacred imaginations and idols and demons and all sorts of fun stuff like that.
Yes.
And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Again, just another little experiment we're trying out.
I hear we also have something right before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Thanksgiving Eve. We're going to do dinner church, which I'm excited about. That's going to be a whole evening of hospitality and coming together around food and worshiping together around a dinner table.
Yeah.
Or many dinner tables.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Because we're going to need a few tables. But yeah, we're gonna work together and make a meal and serve it to one another. And we're inviting the Mission Outpost community to come and be a part of it. And it can just be a good space for people to come and everybody's got their kind of Thanksgiving plans for the day of, but that night before is, it's not a religious holiday, and yet it's like giving thanks is one of the most like sacred things that we do.
Okay.
And it's how so giving thanks before the meal and giving thanks around the meal. That's one of the primary ways that a lot of people pray, and so I've done this dinner church a few times before in a few other places, and it's always a lot of fun.
I'm sure.
So.
And I'm sure lots of good food and all that stuff.
Good food, good community. It's real good. So I'm excited about that.
That's cool. And then you also have the Roll for Joy.
For Joy stuff going on.
Right.
Yeah. So faith and play. I've got a retreat that I'm leading here in just a little less than 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's like a retreat for ministry leaders.
Okay.
And so there's 20 folks flying in from around the country or driving in from out of state or in state. And we're going to play and talk about how the unique ways that God makes us are special, and not only are they kind of make us who we are, but they also can be pathways for us to experience the divine and to see the divine in one another. A lot of times we think when we when we get to be a part of a church or a big organization that we have to look a certain way or act a certain way or be a certain way, and that is not the message that we have to pull from scriptures. That there is, throughout the Bible, there are a diversity of people that are interacting with God, and ways that God is showing up and blessing from people that are foreigners, and that's what some of what Ruth is about.
That's a great segue.
Segueing right into our topic.
Right. And so to sort of even also maybe clue you in on it, we stopped at a pause. I'm sure that you've heard Pastor Paul's sermon, but we were left at a pause. So, if I believe it right, Naomi and Ruth are about to set off on the journey. Orpah has said goodbye because
she wanted to go back to her family.
Yep, she wanted to go back to her family, and also Ruth sort of Ruth is the younger one, right?
Ruth is the younger woman, the Moabite.
Yes.
Yep.
And I say Naomi because my eldest daughter's name is actually Naomi, and that's how we've pronounced it. But I know some people pronounce it Naomi or whatever.
Oh,
we could say whatever.
I say Naomi.
Okay. Pastor Paul says it differently. So.
Oh, he says Naomi?
Yeah, or Naomi.
Naomi?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways,
sure.
He says it confidently, and that's okay.
That is the trick to reading the Bible, is when you come up against a name, a place name or a person's name that you have no idea, how that might have been pronounced. You just say it with confidence.
Yep. Exactly.
That's good enough.
So we're at the pause, and they're about to set off on their journey. I assume this is where you're kind of taking things up, or fill me in on
so we're still in the first chapter, 3 weeks in just the first chapter of Ruth, which is not a big book, but it's nice and luxurious a little bit to slow down and take a slower pace with it, and as you dig in, so they had set off, the three women had set off a little bit on the journey, and Naomi and Ruth and Orpah had all been together. And so they traveled a little bit, and then Naomi was like, stop following me, go home. And Orpah listened and went home, and Ruth said, kind of made her declaration of
your people will be
faith,
my
and your people are my
and
people, which is it's a declaration of love, and it's just an acknowledgement of the power of found family. Mm-hmm. And that they're, that was kind of on that journey. And this week we're picking up at the end of that journey. So there's not much we're told about how that journey goes. It happens, and they come back to Bethlehem. And after that week of walking around the Dead Sea, then they come home. And in that time, Naomi, she sent them away because she was in despair. Like, she did not see her life having any meaning anymore. Mm. And saw what she was going back to kind of as, I don't know, I feel like almost like this punishment, like she was punishing herself, like she had lost all hope for her own life. Almost
in a beggar sort of a
way. She was going to go back, and she was like, I have nobody to support me. I'm going to go back. I'm going to have to beg. I'm going to exist on the margins. She's already written the rest of her story, and it's not good. But she's kind of succumbed to the fatalism of it. And so when she gets back, she's still in the midst of that despair. She's still, even though Ruth has been traveling with her, the person that she, ostensibly probably loved the most, her husband, and the other two that she loved just as much, her two sons, they're gone. They're dead. And there's nothing going to bring them back. And so when she gets back to Bethlehem, people are all stirred up. The scriptures say the whole town was stirred up, and the women are saying, is that Naomi? Is that? I mean, they haven't seen her for 10 years,
right?
And so anytime you run into somebody you haven't seen in a while, you're like, oh, hey, you.
Yeah.
But not only has it been 10 years, but it's been 10 hard years. And now she's in the midst of grief. And she doesn't feel like the person that she left as. And so she says, no, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara.
Okay.
And in Hebrew, names are very significant, and throughout Scripture, names are very significant. So Naomi is a name that means pleasant, and Mara is a name that means bitter. And so instead of this pleasant sweetness that she's named after, she cannot feel any sort of pleasure in life, and says, God's dwelt harshly with me. And there's actually a bit of it's a poetic lament that's recorded in Scripture, and it's recorded like the laments that come in Psalms or in other places in the prophets, and in in a lot of Bibles, it's written like in a different way. It's the text is set kind of in verse to show us that this is a bit of poetry. This is a lament that's been recorded and important and written down and repeated, and so the whole of that is, call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? So there's no hope. There's really no faith either. I mean, there's a relationship that's maintained with God in her naming of God, and yet it's also this like bitter lament, like, God, what have you done? And a blaming of God for everything. And a lot of times in the story, and what one way to look at it is that, all right, well, Ruth is there. Like, she's not empty. Ruth is there, and we're going to see how Ruth is going to be able to bring her life by the end of the story into a great amount of fullness again. Like, she's going to have an honored place in society. She's going to be kind of roped back into community. She's not going to be a beggar, begging in the margins. And it is through her wisdom that Ruth is able to kind of navigate the rest of the story. But Naomi's not, she's not seeing Ruth. She's not valuing Ruth right now. And she's just grieving.
Yeah, she probably just thinks that she is an extra mouth that they have to look after and figure out. And
an extra mouth to feed, somebody, and she didn't want Ruth to come.
No.
Go home. And Ruth said, no, I'm staying. But go home. And that there is, there is a way that the people of the town, they see that, and they don't just brush past her grief. Sometimes, if there's something hard in our lives, like somebody has, they've had a relationship end, maybe a breakup or a divorce, or there's been like a diagnosis of some significant illness, or a death of somebody close to you, and everybody asks you for a while after that happens in your life, well, how are you doing? And when they ask you that, they don't really want to hear the real answer. Right. Yeah. They want to hear you say, well, I'm getting by.
I'm fine.
I'm holding it together. I'm hanging in there. They don't want you to say, like, I'm falling apart. Like, I don't know how to even get up out of bed in the morning. They don't want to hear the grief that we often live with. And so, like, in the community, it's hard to find places to share that real pain. The people of Bethlehem, as Naomi comes, and even Ruth, like, she's walked alongside her for days now and is hearing this, and hears Naomi say, "Don't call me Naomi anymore, call me Mara." But so they see that, and they write down this, her lament. They inscribe it in Scripture, and we're still reading her words today, where she's saying, "Call me Mara," and throughout the rest of the story, nobody calls her Mara. They call her Naomi. And so they see her grief and they see beyond it. I think there's something like when we are in the pits of despair that we can't see a way out for ourselves. Yeah. This is kind of this is why suicide helplines help. Is because they are able, when somebody gets to that point of despair where they feel like my life doesn't matter, I have no purpose, my life is only pain, and like the only way out of that pain is to end my life. That there is, what we see is that is a temporary state, even though if you are in that moment, like, it feels eternal. Because the pit is so deep that you can't see out of it, and you are in it. But like if somebody calls into a suicide helpline, like, part of it is just talking with somebody long enough that they can kind of find their way out, because it passes. Yeah. And so the community, they see her despair, they honor it, they write it down, but then they also see beyond it. They know that there is more to her story than just this grief, that there is more to the life that is to come than just this, and that she has more to offer. And Ruth will come and ask her for advice and help, and it will be very helpful, and she will find purpose. But that ability for the community to see beyond it is powerful. And and that's God working through the community. That's God, because God does the same thing. God sees us in our pain, sees us in our smallness, in our limits, in our, in the ways that we can't keep everything together, and sees beyond it, sees what we might yet be, and dreams that we might become more fully that person that God has made us to be, and that we are still only experiencing in part the wonders of. And so, we coupled this story with Ruth with the story in the Gospel of Matthew of Jesus and his disciples and the feeding of the 5,000. Okay. And this is another instance where there's an instance of seeing what is, and acknowledging that, and then also seeing beyond that in a way that Jesus is able to see that the disciples and the crowds can't yet. And yet, then even like the generosity, right, part of it with the kid, right? Yeah. Well, in the kid whose lunch it is that shares, that's only in John. Okay. So can you tell me the significance of that? Because isn't it true that the Gospels are each Gospel is kind of different audience? Is that? Yeah. I mean, they were written in different communities, kind of around different. There's slightly different goals with each one, and there's a lot of thought about why are some written the way they are and others written differently. Like the Gospel of Mark is like one supposition is that the stories of Jesus were told, like the gospel story of Jesus, of his life, was told orally. Like, it wasn't written down at first. It was a verbal telling that people would tell, and that Mark is basically the the transcription or like the notes of somebody's telling of that verbally.
Which could actually mean that things could have changed a little bit, right?
Well, sure. I mean, it's then there are differences in each of the Gospels. Like,
right.
there's differences, and we don't, like the point of the Gospels isn't necessarily just to give us a history,
right,
of like in the way that we think of like of a history story now. What are just the facts, but to help us meet the person of Jesus. Like that's the point of the Gospels, is to help us meet the person of Jesus as Jesus impacted people's lives and can impact ours. And so, Mark is probably the earliest Gospel. Luke cribbed off a lot of Mark and has kind of some other sources. And Luke's goal was to write everything down in as orderly a fashion as possible.
Because he was a doctor, wasn't he, or something?
That's the legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was Matthew, which is a little bit later and more kind of interested in making connections between Jesus and Moses and making connections to this particular community. And there's also some other writings that came out of that community called the Didache that was just part of like rules of life in this Christian community that's coming up. And so it's a lot more like interested in theological pieces.
Okay.
And then John is the weird one that kind of, there's stories in John that we don't see anywhere else. But the feeding of the 5,000 shows up in all four Gospels. And in John, the lunch, the food, the 5 loaves and 2 fish, they come from a young boy who was there.
Okay.
In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the young boy isn't named or isn't show up. Doesn't mean it wasn't there.
Right.
And maybe he was one of the disciples, but in Matthew, the way it's phrased is Jesus is talking to his disciples. The disciples are saying, there's a bunch of people here. We're out in a wilderness, 5,000 people. Everybody's getting hungry. Tell them to go home. And Jesus says, you give them something to eat.
Right.
And the disciples say, well, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. And so this is the disciples saying, we see the crowd, we see our resources, they do not match.
No.
and that is all they can see, is the scarcity, is kind of the impossibility of it.
Which mirrors with Naomi, because she's in this despair.
Yeah.
And like
she's like, I've gotta keep living, I've gotta provide for this other person. I don't know how. I don't see a point. I think it feels impossible. And so, the disciples are, they're feeling like this is an impossible task. And Jesus says, well, you give them something. Well, that's all we have. Well, fine, give it to me. And he says, have everybody sit down, and he blesses the food and begins to share it. And then, I think, Pastor Paul, maybe you've talked in one of these podcasts about, what's the miracle there, and that there's more than one way to understand what that miracle is, whether it's this supernatural multiplication of food, or, the way that this just like giving of everything that they had inspired a change in heart
of all the people
around.
And
I love my magic stories.
Yeah.
And scriptures are fun, and I get a lot of like, it helps. Like I like to kind of demystify some of that too, and think about, okay, well, what is this experience, and think about like, what's the bigger miracle? The one that requires nothing of me if I'm in that crowd, the one that just provides for my creature comforts for a little bit, and okay, I got a meal, great, or the one that's like changed my heart, and that's that change of hearts and minds, that the metanoia is the Greek word for it. Repentance is another word for it. That's what the stories, that's what Jesus is about. That's what his mission is about. It's about changing hearts and minds. It's about bringing people back to the ways of love and the ways of faith and the ways of caring for one another in God. And so I think that the miracle that changes hearts and minds is a more profound miracle than what, some supernatural something.
And changing from empire back to shalom.
Right. Yeah, because, Rome knew the power of providing people food. That was their motto was bread and circus. Let's give people food and let's entertain them. And we can do whatever. They'll let us do whatever we want.
Right.
And it works. Like, you entertain people, you feed them. People are like, well, maybe life isn't so bad. Maybe you can have all the power. People will put up with a lot when they're fed and entertained. And Jesus was about a lot more than just feeding and entertaining people. And that he was about transforming people, and invites us into a transformed life. And so that, I think ends up being, for me, I see it as an even bigger miracle. And that there's also something that Jesus doesn't say. So in that crowd of people, let's just kind of talk that out a little bit. There's 5,000 people there. They've got 5 loaves and 2 fish. If we go along this sharing idea of the miracle, and kind of play that idea out a little bit more, there is at the end of that story, they go around and they collect 12 baskets full of leftovers.
Yep.
So not only, did they look out at the community and they saw a crowd of hungry people and they wondered, how are we going to feed them? And they felt responsible for them. They wanted to care for this crowd. They saw that there wasn't enough. And probably the people were beginning to wonder, like, how there's going to be enough. And I brought something. Maybe a couple of them brought something for themselves because they planned, but their neighbors didn't. Like, there's enough people in that crowd that didn't bring anything.
Right.
But if we go with the sharing idea of that story, then there's also people in that crowd that brought plenty, because there's more than enough to go around at the end of it. And what Jesus doesn't say to his disciples is, well, hey, you see that guy with the entourage over there? Like, he brought a wagon full of food. He's going to keep it to himself. Go over there, ask if he'll share. Like, Jesus doesn't send out the disciples to go talk to the rich guy.
Right.
To share. He, partly because probably knows that's not going to work. And if it did, like, it wouldn't be in the same spirit. Like, if I got to provide for all these people, like, they should have brought their own. They should have earned it.
Right.
Like, when we have a lot of resources, we want to hold on to them. And there is, like, they begin to change us and kind of trap us, and that the only way that the wealthy were going to share was if everybody around them was sharing too. The people that had a lot of money, the people had a little bit, the people that brought a lot of food, the people that brought nothing. If everybody was sharing just what they had, then there's this that they're seeing that they're changed, and they're not singled out because of their wealth, but they're also not singled out because they're not made more important because of their wealth either. That they're part of the crowd, and that I think there's a lot of wealth inequality in our world right now, and a lot of nonprofits, church included, like, we exist on donations and like depend on donations of a couple individuals more than others.
Right.
And yet, like when we do something like our capital campaign or our stewardship drive, like it's an invitation for all of us to participate and share. And the only way that we do this is if we're all doing it together. And so no matter the size of the gift, like God can put it to use.
Right.
And the disciples think their gift is too small, and Jesus says, "No, this is going to be the thing that unlocks everything."
Right. Is there any, like Pastor Paul talks about the significance of numbers, although I do know that's in the New Testament, which is more Greek-driven. We talked about this. And then the Hebrew side, there's significance to the numbers. Do you think that there's any significance to the number 12 as far as how many baskets?
Yeah, 100%. Like Jesus picks 12 disciples for a reason. And there's 12 baskets. That's significant here.
That each one of their baskets is full.
Right, sure. Yeah, maybe each disciple got a basket to go around and fill. But that the number 12 represents the whole community, because it's connected to the 12 tribes of Israel.
Yeah, yep.
The 12, which was the 12 sons of Israel.
Israel, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Jacob, Israel.
Jacob, yes.
Same
okay,
person.
Yes, I did get it. Okay.
You got it. And so that number 12, because of that history, takes on this meaning that when you it's a number that means like the whole community. And the numbers that fish and loaves, 5 loaves, 2 fish. What do those add up to?
7.
Yes. That's a holy number.
Yep.
Yes. And so there is some divine providence in that number as well.
Okay.
It says like, okay, God is in this.
Yep.
And so it's this promise to be that Jesus sees, maybe sees the resources available, sees that people aren't seeing the connection. They're not making that connection to saying like, okay, there's enough here that we could share, that we could all be well, and invites people to see beyond that. And so, we often live in a world that's obsessed with size. With we want to be the biggest, we want to have the most, we want to be the strongest, and there can be a real power in small things, and remembering that God sees beyond our smallness. And I'm a lover of, right now my daughter is wanting to listen to the Lord of the Rings on tape, so that's our driving story, and it's a long story,
right?
But that's what we listen to in the car now, is the Fellowship of the Ring, and we're on. And in the Fellowship of the Ring, there's these little people called hobbits.
Oh, really?
And, for anybody who's lived under a rock forever and doesn't know these stories. But J.R.R. Tolkien, he's a Christian.
Right.
And he's writing this. He talks about like his purpose in writing, and the way that he's writing is he's interweaving the values and the stories of his faith into this story, and that the Lord of the Rings is a fantasy story, and it's a deeply Christian story as well, and it's draws on his faith, it draws on the powers of faith, and even though it's in a different world, and like it's not as straight of an analogy as like you get in C.S. Lewis with like, Aslan is Jesus.
Yeah.
The lion is clearly Jesus, and it's a pure metaphor. The way Tolkien writes is that he interweaves the values that Jesus talks about into his stories, and so into his stories, like he sees from Scripture and from these stories of faith, like there is a power in small things to do great wonders, and that God can take small things and do amazing
Like small
stuff.
people.
And so,
Like hobbits.
what do? We take a hobbit, a small person that the world has overlooked, that have no sense of having any sort of strength, that everybody overlooks, and that they become the only ones that can actually save the world.
Right.
Is the power that they have, and that they're the only ones that can wield carry the ring and not be totally corrupted by it. They're the only ones
Right.
that can do it. And so, over and over, there are messages in that story about just the power of small people and small things
Yes.
to do deeds greater than we know.
Yes.
And that's, I think that's kind of what I'm taking away from these readings this week is God sees us and in our smallness, sees us in our, in our failures, sees us in just the limits that we have, and God sees beyond it too. And through the eyes of faith, I think we're invited to see beyond where we might put the limits of our power or our influence, and just take a stand and participate in our faith and in the world.
That's great, and that's kind of where you end up stopping, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until the next thing. What is the overall theme with this section?
See. Seeing.
Yep. See as in seeing.
Yeah.
Not see as in
right.
letter C.
It's what do we see? It's how we see.
Anyways, if you have any comments or have questions that you'd like us to answer, you can email us at communications@popmn.org, or if you want to find the audio itself, you can find that on our worship downloads page as well, along with on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks for coming and joining along, and next week we'll have Paul back in the seat, and we will come back from that pause. And don't forget, you need to guess what color cowboy hat Paul has.
Oh.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
So anyways, thanks again for joining us on this episode 3, season 2, and we look forward to having you back.
Thanks for coming along.